Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Teed Up. Today we're going to be speaking with Kyle Morris from the Golf Room in Columbus, Ohio. Um, Kyle's been a friend for a long time, known him since he was a young age, and he has a unique story about the Golf Room. And we're really going to discuss, best ways to grow your business, around the game of golf.
Thanks, Chip. Well, I think when did we know each other? Like when I was like 10?
I would say, yeah, I guess it would have been 99, 2000.
So
Yeah,
long.
before Y2K.
You've seen the transformation of everything. So thank you so much for having me. Chip was actually the assistant pro at the home club that I grew up at. So all of these origin stories, you were a part of these stories from the get-go. So thank you so much for having me here. And for me personally, like V1 has had a monumental impact on my life as a player, and now because of that as a coach. So super excited to be here.
Great. Just to start off, tell us a little bit about the Golf Room, the vision that where it came from, and then also just both the in-person and online aspects of the Golf Room and how those came about.
So essentially, after I played, I went and played college golf at Seton Hall, and I had a good career there. I was, I'm in the Hall of Fame there, and turned pro. I turned pro, got engaged, and graduated in a weekend, which basically sums up my personality, handling all those massive life decisions in 3 days. But then after I did that, I played professional golf for 8 years. I played 40 weeks a year in 20 different countries, and I basically had like the greatest team of instructors on grass, right? Many of them have been named by Golf Digest now as like the legends of golf, with Mike Bender as my swing coach and Stan Utley for putting and James Seekman for short game. And then the team from Vision 54 as my mental side. And I would call Mike and I would go, "Hey Mike, like, what are you doing today?" And he's like, "I'm going up to Sea Island to like see Zach Johnson." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. Like, what do you guys do up there?" And he's like, "Well, I work on a swing." And then Peter Sanders would like work on his stats, and then Morris Pickens is working on his mind, and Randy Myers working on his body, and we all collaborate to make Zach like really, really good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to have all my team collaborate. Like, can you talk to my team? But I have no money, so can you do it for free? And he's like, nah, not really, but like, wait, we can kind of try. So when I moved back home, just basically to be close to family, because we had we had two kids at that time. Now we have three. I wanted to create a place where basically the passionate golfer can have a holistic training facility to get better in all aspects of the game. So it wasn't just about like the skill. It's not just about the body. It's not just about the mind. It's not just about course management. It's the whole thing that encapsulates a player. So the Golf Room did not start as this facility we currently have, which is now, this facility is 17,000 square feet. It's got 12 TrackMan bays. It's actually the largest player development facility, from what I understand, in basically like the Western Hemisphere. It basically started in a CrossFit gym in a kitchen, and then it went from 1 bay to 2 bays to 3 bays to 6 bays to 7 bays. And then because of that expansion, Chip, you had asked about it, we said, hey, we got to take this outside of the walls of Columbus, which we created the Golf Room Everywhere, which we've got 50,000 users in that, and kind of helping players all over the world and kind of bringing this Golf Room experience to them in the comfort of their living room, anywhere they are. So that's kind of the quick backstory, when it all started back in Worthington Hills, where we were. So when I started becoming obsessed with looking at my golf swing on camera.
That's awesome. So again, you started your in-person business, the demand grew, and that's what made you just decide to turn to the online business, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was one compared to some business models. Like we gradually made steps. So my poor wife, like we did an expansion every year for 5 years, which were, those are super stressful. And even right now, like we opened this a year ago, and next month we're going to be at capacity. So like we're at full membership. Our teachers basically can't teach any more than they are. So we're continuing to expand and continuing to grow. And then that bridged out into the online program, because of the fact that I feel a calling to really give the amateur and the passionate golfer the ability to have constant contact with a coach. I think that it's really important for players to be able to have coaching on demand, so that when they're on the range hitting balls and they're not hitting it really well, they have the ability to essentially send in a video and within a moment's notice, like, tell them exactly what they need to do and how they need to get better and what should their feedback drill, because we are very passionate about the use of feedback and basically kind of forcing the motor pattern rather than just trying to feel it. Like, we don't want to be wasting time. So we want to make sure that when you're practicing, you're actually practicing. Right. So look at these throwback videos. That's amazing.
Yeah. 2014, we were able to pull some of the old videos when you were with James Seekman.
Oh, nice. So, I mean, I would venture to say that I maybe have more V1 videos in my portal than maybe anyone. And who knows if like how they all stay there. But I was actually telling the story yesterday that, you know, the little tiny balls that like hold the balls, right? They hold like 35 balls. It would take me 2 hours to hit 2 of those bags at TBC Scottsdale, because honestly, as God is my witness, I would literally take my phone, I would sit it behind on my bag, I'd film it, I'd hit, then back, this is, 2010, so it would take like 30 seconds to load in. Then I'd look at it, then I'd film, then I'd look, hit it, like hit, film, look, hit, film, look, hit, film, look, right? And it was just this constant thing where every swing that I was making was of value, which we could go into an entire tangent of that, of kind of me stumbling upon this idea of block practice and random practice and creating spacing and variability just from an instruction standpoint and a player development standpoint. But I'm obsessed with video, right? Because I think that video is worth, 1,000 words, right? Like, if I always say like, hey, this is how I look, like, even though they say the camera adds 10 pounds, like, nope, that's just how you look. So if my swing looks over the top, like, and you think it's not, no, it is, you're over the top. So I was really, really obsessed with making my swing look incredible. And V1 was really the product that was really helping me move the needle to do that.
That's awesome. Next up, we're going to sort of take a step further as far as your staff. Again, you created a huge staff of, great golf instructors, whether it's, in the Golf Room Everywhere, your online platform, but then also, the in-person folks there in Columbus. And I know you're currently hiring as well, always looking to expand. What's your process that you think, or you use when hiring staff, training staff, that whole process?
So for me, there's a few things, and there's probably the one thing as I've continued to grow as an entrepreneur, right? Because I've got the Golf Room, I've got the Golf Room Everywhere. I've also got collegegolf.com, which is kind of like, it's the old pink college golf guide. We brought that back and repurposed it out of the grave. But when hiring when hiring instructors or just hiring staff, I think that one thing that gets overlooked is what are the traits that the business owner needs in each department? Because, for example, if I am hiring someone to do, let's say, marketing, right? If I'm hiring someone to do marketing, it's very easy for us to hire someone where you go, hey, I like that guy, right? Or I like that girl. But it's really finding the traits that are needed inside that job rather than hiring someone based upon whether I like them. Because, for example, if we're interviewing, obviously I am a massive extrovert, right? I could talk to a cat, but I'm going to be drawn to wanting to hire people who are extrovert. That might not be a good thing for someone who's doing like my operations role, right? Like that's or my accounting or whatever it may be. So on the instructor alone side, what we really look for on those traits is I'm a really, really big believer that hiring people who know how to sell and know how to basically, they're really good storytellers and they're really articulate and they know how to essentially control the aroma of a room is really important from the instruction standpoint. I feel like that is a little bit more inherent by God's unique design for that human being rather than saying being able to teach. I can teach anyone how to teach, but it's harder to teach that person how to sell, right? So that's kind of something where I'm doing. But then at the same time, at the Golf Room, we have players that are flying in all over the world to work inside the Golf Room and get the Golf Room system. So it's different in the fact that our teachers all teach the same certification that I've created, and they are teaching the same way. So you can almost like pass, we don't, but like kind of do, but you could pass student from teacher to teacher and it would be okay. Whereas there's some other bigger name teaching bodies that have like locations and there's not really a framework or a system in which they're going through. Like you have one guy that teaches like this philosophy and another guy teaches like this philosophy, and they might be counterintuitive. So the first thing is kind of hiring, like we'll say, this idea that they know how to sell for all intents and purposes, and then also that they believe in the core philosophy of what the golf room stands for, which is this idea that if you were to take the idea of constant contact and feedback out of the golf room would cease to exist, right? So they need to have the same vision of what we have as a business, and then from there we go, okay, like here's a home run.
That's awesome. So obviously, the coach, the instructor is a very important piece, that's going to make the golf room thrive. The next part, I've been in there, your technology is like second to none. How do you decide on technology and what technology you're going to, bring in?
I think that there is something to be said about in 10,000 foot view. And I was actually just had, what you might like this being that we're both Ohio State fans. Michael Redd was just in here, right? Like an old Ohio State basketball player on the dream. Well, he was on the dream team. Anyways, he was on the Olympic team, might be a Hall of Famer in the NBA. I don't know. And we were talking about the technology because like we've got basically everything here. And there's something to be said about having almost too much technology, right? Like we've got Sports Box and we've got obviously V1 pressure mats and we've got TrackMans and focus bands and VK vests and like everything under the sun. But it's being able to take that stuff and make something that is very, very complex and make it very, very simple and make it to where for us, the technology, even though we have all of these things like putt views and all this stuff, it's just validating what we're seeing on video. So like what V1 does in providing the video for what the player needs to be looking at, that is the ultimate guide. And then we use the technology to validate the findings that we see in the video, right? But I own more the TrackMan people would not me love saying this, but I say it all the time. I own more TrackMan individually as an individual owner than anyone in the United States. And if they said to me and they go, Kyle, you're going to either take the video or the numbers. Which one do you want? I'd go take the numbers. Like, I don't care. Just give me the video. Right. So the video is paramount to what we are doing. And then everything else that we do helps frame and massage the argument where the guy's like, I'm not swaying. It's like, yeah, man, you are. Like your pelvis is moving 3.5 inches behind. See? And they're like, oh yeah, okay. So, and that's the point is that there's so many times that amateurs like even here, like this, I remember this lesson. He's showing me because before this, I took the club inside and hooded and I would duff every chip I hit. And he was like, it's inside and hooded. And I'm like, no, it's not. And then you show a video and I'm like, oh yeah, it is. You're right. So, video is worth 1,000 words.
Yep. Can't lie.
Yep.
You cannot lie. So, as a new instructor, somebody's looking to start their own business in golf coaching. What would be the one thing that a piece of advice, recommendation, just to get started? Where would you begin?
Where I will, the one piece I say, because like we're hiring right now for our online position, which is like inside of our Stock Shot Club. And one thing that I'm constantly talking with these players or these teachers that I'm interviewing is the way to learn how to teach is to teach. Right. And that was something that one of my mentors, Mike told me that, but one of my other mentors is this gentleman named, Lauren Anderson, who owns an amazing company called Proponent Group, which kind of helps coaches just learn the business side of like how to do what we're doing. But it's really, I think there's a misconception first in the fact that like the only way to learn how to teach is to teach. And then the other problem I think with teachers, which is where I think we really excel as a teaching body inside the golfing space, is that most teachers, in my personal opinion, they do not have a philosophy of how do you take a player from A to Z. And I mean, at the golf room, like over here to my left, we have banners that basically stretch the top of the ceiling. And it's like, here's how you build a swing in 11 words, right? Like you tilt, turn, hinge, shift, drive, pivot, snap, turn, match, and fold. Like, and then inside of that, if you go, what do you mean about like hinging? I mean, I could do an hour seminar just on that. So there's intricacies of it, but we're always, it's working on the first things first. And for that young teacher, learning like what is the systematic way to go about building a swing? Because even though the guy looks like he early extends and you want to fix the early extension, like that might just be an effect. I always say, like, there's smoke and there's fire in the swing. You would never put out the smoke that you see in a house, right? If the house is on fire, you put out the fire. So it's understanding all of the cause and effect and having really good mentors, right? I mean, luckily, by the grace of God, as a player, I was learning from some of the greatest teachers in the game. So when I hit the ground running to teach, it was just like, and it just like kind of took off right from the start, which was really just, falling into place and divine intervention, quite frankly. So that would be kind of the advice that I would give to them, is try to figure out what it is, what are the core principles that you actually believe in. And that was one of the things that I did when I first started teaching in 2016 was I was like, these are my fundamentals, right? Like, and these are the order in which they go.
That's awesome. I mean, it's really a systematic approach to it. And every lesson you probably start at the beginning and work right through that process.
And I think the thing is like, there's our system, right? And we have our system, and then there's other systems, and those systems works too, right? Like if you have like a stack and tilt system, like, whether we disagree or don't agree, or like George Gankus, which is opposite of like stack and tilt, like there's things in that system that make it work with itself, right? And like if I put something, if the stack and tilt guys put something from the George Gankus camp, like those things might not work together. But like we know that if the club is doing this and the body is doing this, the ball produces this. And that's our system, right? But the point is that a lot of times the young teachers, they don't understand how these puzzle pieces actually marriage to each other. And they might actually be like oil and water. You know what I mean? Yeah. And the other thing too, Chip, and this is what's interesting about even going on this thing, and not to go on a tangent, but when I was down at the PGA show, it's interesting with all the technology that's coming down. The divide between teaching, it's not getting wider. It's actually, I think, getting narrower because technology is validating what it is. So like the guy can say, yeah, like you should get behind the ball, or like too much, right? Or even like you should get in front of the ball. And it's like, right, but like there's so much data. This is what tour players do. So like if you say one of these things are outside the realm, you're an idiot. And like that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a lot of stuff we've done with ground pressure, we see things that, whether you're a stack and tilter or whatever you're doing, as you're rotating back, when you're a P3, most likely, if you're a great player, you're around that 75 to 85% pressure into your trail side. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on.
Yeah, those are just non-negotiables.
Yes, awesome.
So, close-handed issue.
Yeah, just to wrap everything up, I mean, to me, seeing the golf room and what you've built there, that's super cool from, where you were when you were 10 years old to what you've done now. But looking back, on your own career, what's the coolest teaching moment that you feel like you've had?
The coolest teaching moment I had, probably I had the luxury for about 4 or 5, well, I guess it'd be 4 years. One of my good friends was Michael Thompson, and Michael Thompson was the #1 amateur in the world. And him and I traveled together and played together, and we were in practice rounds together. And Michael in 2018, maybe, at that point in his journey, he was really struggling. He was ranked 570th, I think, in the world. He was ranked 175th in ball striking. He was #1 in putting, so he could putt the brains out of it, but like he just couldn't hit it really well. And over the course of like the 4 years of being together, he went from 175 in ball striking to 63rd, I believe, and then 570th to 90th. And it was through the system. So it was really validating what we were doing. And just the coolest, if we're going to say like, what is that journey was really cool. But I think because it was the first real PGA Tour player that I worked with, but it was cool just to go and be inside the ropes in some of these really big events like the Players Championship and basically kind of, like checking off the list. Like, okay, I've done that, right? I understand what that life is like. And it was nice to just kind of get that under my belt and see what it was like. And just see that the teachings that we were doing was really validating what we're teaching to our recreational players online or at the golf room.
Gotcha. Then just one last question. Why does V1 work for you? Both, your business, both online and in the in-person lessons as well?
So I think that the V1, like I said, is I think that there is a there's different apps out there in regards to, hey, you can film a swing and obviously you can just put it on your camera, but like the amount of models, right? Because there is something to be said, kind of going back to what we were talking about, Chip, of like technology has made the gap of what someone can say very narrow, right? Because there's a confines as to what is truth. And I think that what V1 for me, especially coming back as a former player, right, and really doing it, is its ability to essentially compare and contrast the models against myself. Because the models kind of, if you can create these similarities in the models, which I have done, right, through these different principles, like I call steep, shallow, steep. But it allows us to have what is a standard of beauty of like, hey, this is kind of what I'm moving towards, right? So, and that's the beauty of golf, is like you're trying to perfect a pattern that, quite frankly, can't be perfected, right? Like no one has a perfect golf swing except for Iron Byron, who's the USGA robot that hits all the shots, right? But V1 to me is something that, like, if you're not filming your golf swing in practice, I'm wondering if you're actually practicing.
That's awesome. It's a great way to wrap up, Kyle. Thanks for your time today. Hope everything continues on your journey. Continue doing everything you're doing, and keep staying great.
Thanks, buddy. See ya.
Thanks.